Hi, I'm Ryan from Ratings.com. Today, we'll be doing a review of the Gigabyte M34WQ. We'll be evaluating it on our standardized test bench to see how it performs and if you should buy it. The M34WQ is a 34-inch ultrawide monitor with a 144Hz refresh rate and a 3440 by 1440 resolution. It's one of the many monitors in Gigabyte's M series of gaming monitors designed with both gaming and productivity in mind. It has good gaming performance as well as some other good features which we'll talk about in the review. The first thing that stands out for the M34WQ is its flat panel, since most other ultrawide monitors on the market opt for a curved screen. This monitor looks exactly like most of the other entries in the M series, only stretched horizontally. The stand supports the monitor fairly well, but there is some wobble due to the size of the display. There's a gap at the back of the stand for some basic cable management, which is nice. If you don't want to use the stand, then you can mount it to a monitor arm using the standard 100 by 100 VESA mount. There's a pretty wide range of inputs with 2 HDMI ports, a DisplayPort, and a USB-C port. The USB-C port supports DisplayPort Alt Mode, 15 watts of power delivery, and data transfer. This is what allows the KVM, or keyboard video mouse switch, to work, so you can have your work laptop connected via USB-C and your gaming PC over DisplayPort, all while using the same set of peripherals. Do note that 15 watts is typically not enough to charge most laptops, so you might also need to connect its external power supply. You can also use the picture-in-picture or picture-by-picture modes to display the inputs from 2 devices simultaneously. Now, let's take a look at the tests. We'll start with the contrast. A high contrast ratio is important if you use the monitor in the dark for deep, dark scenes. Like most IPS displays, the M34WQ has fairly mediocre contrast, so in a dark room, blacks will tend to look more gray, which is not ideal. Local dimming is a feature that controls the brightness of individual zones of the backlight. This allows for much deeper dark scenes in things like video games, as the area of dark objects can be further darkened. As a result, the overall contrast can be boosted. The M34WQ does not support a local dimming feature. Now, a high peak brightness is important either in a bright room to counteract glare, or if you want bright highlights and a more impactful image, especially in high dynamic range or HDR games. This monitor gets decently bright. In SDR, it should be more than bright enough for most viewing environments. It doesn't get any brighter for HDR content and is actually very slightly dimmer. It really lacks the sort of brightness to make HDR content pop. Also important for a bright room is good reflection handling. The M34WQ has a hazy screen coating that helps to diffuse reflections and reduce their intensity. Overall, bright rooms shouldn't be much of an issue as it does a really good job of diffusing direct reflections. A potential downside of a hazy coating is if it causes small details like text to appear grainy. Text clarity is also impacted by a bunch of factors though, like the subpixel arrangement. Overall, it's good as you can see in these images. The screen coating doesn't have much of an impact. The top photo is with Windows ClearType, which helps diagonal lines look more clear. Without ClearType in the bottom image, it's all right, but does lack some subpixel detail. Good viewing angles are important to ensure details at the far sides of the screen don't look washed out. Like most IPS displays, the M34WQ has good viewing angles, which is important since the flat, ultra-wide display means that the edges of the screen are at significantly larger angles than the center of the screen, especially if you sit close to the monitor. Vertically, it shouldn't be much of an issue if the monitor is mounted a bit above or below eye level. An overall uniform screen brightness and color is important when playing video games, to avoid distracting areas that are overly dark or bright. This does vary between units, but we expect this M34WQ we bought to be about typical. The overall screen has a very similar brightness, which is great and shouldn't be an issue. In dark scenes, there is some backlight bleed, as you can see around the bottom edge of this photo. This does change from unit to unit quite a bit, so keep in mind that yours could be better or worse than ours. Accuracy in the standard sRGB color space is important as it's the standard for computer use. This monitor has a specific sRGB color mode, which is excellent as it clamps the colors for accuracy and to avoid an oversaturated image. However, it does map the colors and white balance worse than the standard mode. The standard mode will look a little oversaturated in some content, but it shouldn't be too bad. Do note that the sRGB mode does lock you out of almost all the picture settings except brightness if you plan on using that one for the color space clamping. If you want to take full advantage of this monitor and display vivid colors in things like high dynamic range or HDR games, then the M34WQ is a good choice. It has good coverage of the commonly used DCI-P3 color space, but only okay coverage of the wider Rec 2020 color space. A high refresh rate is important for gaming. It allows the image to be drawn on the screen faster, which makes it more responsive. And if the monitor supports variable refresh rates, then you can get a smooth experience without tearing, regardless of the changing frame rate. The M34WQ has a fairly average refresh rate with 144 Hz when connected via DisplayPort and is limited to 100 Hz when connected via HDMI. It also supports FreeSync as well as being compatible with NVIDIA's G-SYNC. Do note that G-SYNC only works over a DisplayPort connection, so if you're using an NVIDIA GPU, make sure to connect that way to get the most out of the monitor. When playing video games, a fast response time is important for the clearest image without distracting blur. The Gigabyte M34WQ does have a good result overall. There is minor smearing in some of the darker transitions that you can see as a slight dark trail to the left of our moving logo image. This should not be very noticeable though. We recommend sticking to the picture quality overdrive setting as it offers faster response times than off with no overshoot. If the frame rate drops when you're gaming, then luckily the response time is still good. Unfortunately, the best overdrive setting at 60 Hz is off instead of picture quality. If you want a set and forget overdrive setting, then I would go for picture quality if your frame rate tends to be slightly higher, since even if your frame rate does occasionally dip to 60 Hz, the overshoot is not that noticeable. If you really want the clearest image when playing fast-paced games, then black frame insertion or backlight strobing features are useful to reduce blur caused by the persistence of an image during a full frame. You can enable the backlight strobing on the Gigabyte M34WQ at either 120 or 144 Hz. Unlike most monitors, you can also enable VRR at the same time as BFI. With both of these features active, the backlight strobing can go as low as 85 Hz instead of just 120 Hz. Unfortunately, this feature is a little unstable below 85 Hz, and the feature enabling and disabling itself is quite distracting, so ideally you would only use it on games where you can maintain higher frame rates. Now, a low input lag is really important for a responsive feel when playing video games, and unsurprisingly, this monitor is excellent. You shouldn't notice any input lag at both the max refresh rate and at 60 Hz. So, this brings us to the main question. Should you buy this monitor? Well, firstly, it's definitely a good pick for a reasonably priced ultra-wide monitor. It has good gaming performance with good response times and low input lag. It's also packed with features like a built-in KVM, BFI that works with VRR, and picture-in-picture as well as picture-by-picture modes. It's also one of the only flat ultra-wide monitors we've tested. If you're looking for better darkroom performance and want to save a bit of money, then the Dell S3422DWG is a better choice. It uses a curved VA panel with much higher contrast and better peak brightness. It's quite similar in performance to the M34WQ, but has slightly worse response times and lacks the extra productivity features. If those features were not important to you, then stick to the Dell. If you don't mind spending some extra money and want a better gaming experience in the same form factor, then you should consider the LG 34GP950B. It has better response times, gets significantly brighter, and has a higher 180 Hz refresh rate, as well as an NVIDIA G-SYNC module built in. It also lacks the productivity features as well as missing the BFI feature. It comes at a higher price too, so only go for it if you really care about getting a bit more performance.